What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks into a morning talk show and faces down a host who seems determined to humiliate him? In just 33 seconds, what started as a routine interview became one of the most shocking television moments in recent memory, and it only took one comment from Savannah Guthrie to set off a chain of events that would leave audiences speechless and producers scrambling. It was supposed to be a simple interview. Laurence Fishburne, the legendary actor known for his dignified presence both on screen and off, had been invited to the Today Show to discuss his latest project. The cameras were rolling, the studio audience was settled in, and Savannah Guthrie sat across from him with her notes ready. But from the very first moment, something felt off. As the segment began, Guthrie opened with what seemed like a standard greeting. But there was something in her tone, something sharp that Fishburne picked up on immediately. She leaned forward in her chair and said, "So, Laurence, thanks for joining us. I have to say, it's not every day we get someone from, that era of Hollywood. That era." The words hung in the air for a moment. Fishburne's expression didn't change, but you could see something flicker in his eyes. He smiled politely and responded, "Well, I'm grateful to still be working and creating. That's what matters to me." Guthrie nodded, but there was no warmth in it. She glanced down at her cards and continued, "Your new project, it's interesting. I mean, it's not exactly the kind of blockbuster role you used to get, is it? Tell us about this smaller, more independent piece." Smaller, more independent. The subtle digs were starting to pile up. Fishburne maintained his composure, sitting upright with his hands folded. "I've always been drawn to stories that matter," he said calmly. "The size of the production has never been what drives me. It's about the narrative, the characters, the truth we're trying to tell." Right, Guthrie said, waving her hand dismissively. "But let's be honest, these kinds of projects, they're not really getting the attention they used to. Streaming has changed everything. Do you ever feel like maybe your time has passed? Like maybe audiences have moved on?" The studio suddenly felt colder. You could hear the uncomfortable shuffling of the crew off camera. Fishburne paused, taking a slow breath. When he spoke, his voice was measured but firm. "I don't think about time that way, Savannah. Art doesn't have an expiration date. Stories don't stop mattering because of what year it is or what platform they're on." Guthrie laughed, but it wasn't a friendly sound. "That's a very diplomatic answer. But come on, you're talking to me here. This isn't some press junket where you give the prepared responses. This is the Today Show. Our viewers want the real conversation." "I'm being as real as I can be," Fishburne replied. His jaw tightened slightly, the first visible sign that her words were getting to him. "I came here to talk about the work. That's what I thought this was about." "Oh, it is about the work," Guthrie said, leaning back in her chair with an air of superiority. "I'm just curious about why you keep taking these roles that nobody's really talking about. I mean, when was the last time you were in something that actually made headlines, that people were excited about?" The room was completely silent now. Even the camera operators seemed frozen. Fishburne looked at Guthrie for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, quietly but clearly, "Are you asking me that because you genuinely want to know, or because you're trying to make some kind of point?" Guthrie's smile tightened. "I'm asking because our viewers deserve to know why they should care about what you're doing now. We're in a new age of entertainment. Young actors, fresh faces, new perspectives. Where do you fit into that?" Fishburne's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Where do I fit? I fit where I've always fit. In the work, in the craft. I'm not competing with anyone, Savannah. I'm just doing what I've always done, which is showing up and giving everything I have to the story." "But is that enough anymore?" Guthrie pressed. "I mean, honestly, when you look at the industry now, do you ever think maybe it's time to step aside? Let the next generation have their moment?" The question landed like a bomb. Fishburne sat perfectly still, his hands still folded, his posture still upright. But something had shifted in his demeanor. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but there was steel in it. "Step aside," he repeated. "You think that's what I should do?" Guthrie shrugged, as if the weight of what she was suggesting didn't matter. "I'm just saying, maybe it's time to acknowledge that the world has moved on. That what you represented, what you were known for, it's not what people are looking for anymore." Fishburne took a deep breath. You could see him making a decision in real time, weighing whether to let this slide or to say what he was really thinking. Finally, he leaned forward, his voice calm but cutting. "You know what, Savannah? I've been doing interviews for over 40 years. I've sat across from some of the best journalists in the business. People who ask tough questions, people who challenge me, people who push for real answers. But this? He gestured between them. This isn't that. Guthrie's smile faltered for just a second. Excuse me? This isn't journalism. Fishburne continued, his voice steady and clear. This is you trying to belittle someone because you think it makes for good television. You're not interested in my work. You're not interested in what I have to say. You came into this with an agenda, and that agenda was to make me look irrelevant. The color rose in Guthrie's cheeks. I think you're being overly sensitive. I'm asking questions that our audience wants answers to. No, Fishburne said firmly. You're asking questions designed to diminish. There's a difference. And I've sat here and answered them respectfully because that's who I am. But I'm not going to sit here and let you tell me that I need to step aside, that my time is past, that audiences have moved on, because none of that is true. And even if it were, it wouldn't be your place to say it. Guthrie's expression hardened. Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I have a job to do here, and that job is to ask the questions that need to be asked. No, Fishburne said again, his voice rising slightly for the first time. Your job is to inform, to engage, to create dialogue. What you're doing is creating conflict for ratings, and I understand that. I've been in this business long enough to know how it works, but I don't have to participate in it. The tension in the studio was unbearable now. Producers were frantically signaling from off-camera, trying to figure out how to salvage the segment. Guthrie straightened in her chair, her professional mask slipping. I think you're overreacting. This is just a conversation. Is it? Fishburne asked. Because from where I'm sitting, this stopped being a conversation about 5 minutes ago. This became something else. Something I didn't sign up for. Guthrie let out a sharp laugh, and that's when things truly escalated. You know what, Laurence? Maybe you're right. Maybe you don't belong here anymore. Maybe this format, this show, this kind of open dialogue, maybe it's too much for someone from your generation. Maybe you're more comfortable in those quiet little independent films where nobody asks you the hard questions. The words cut through the air like a knife. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Fishburne stared at Guthrie, his expression a mixture of disbelief and disappointment. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached up and removed the microphone clipped to his jacket. What are you doing? Guthrie asked, her voice suddenly uncertain. Fishburne placed the microphone carefully on the table between them. When he spoke, his voice was calm again, but there was an unmistakable finality to it. I'm leaving. Because I respect myself too much to sit here and be treated this way, and I respect your audience too much to participate in whatever this is supposed to be. You can't just leave, Guthrie said, her composure cracking. We're in the middle of a live segment. Watch me, Fishburne replied. He stood up from his chair, straightening his jacket with quiet dignity. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of this unprecedented moment. Studio executives were scrambling, trying to figure out what to do, but there was no playbook for this. No one walks off the Today Show. No one had ever done it before. Guthrie's face flushed red. This is incredibly unprofessional. You agreed to be here. You committed to this interview. Fishburne paused, turning to look at her one last time. I committed to an interview, a real interview, not an ambush, not a platform for you to make yourself feel superior by tearing someone else down. I came here in good faith, Savannah, and you violated that. So yes, I'm leaving, and I'm doing it because I value my integrity more than I value being on your show. He started walking toward the exit. The studio was in chaos now. Camera operators didn't know where to point their lenses. Producers were shouting into headsets, and Savannah Guthrie sat frozen in her chair, watching one of the biggest stars in Hollywood walk away from her show. But then she made one final mistake. As Fishburne reached the edge of the set, she called out after him, her voice loud enough for the microphones to pick up. You know what? Fine, leave. Just proves my point. Your generation can't handle real conversation. You can't handle being challenged. Maybe that's why you're not relevant anymore. Fishburne stopped. For a moment, he stood completely still, his back to the cameras. You could see his shoulders rise and fall with a deep breath. Then he turned around, walking back toward the set. The entire crew held their breath. Was he coming back? Was he going to sit down again? But he didn't sit. He stopped a few feet from Guthrie's chair and looked directly into the camera. When he spoke, he addressed the audience, not her. To everyone watching at home, I want you to know something. Real conversation requires respect. It requires both people coming to the table with honesty and openness. What just happened here? That wasn't conversation. That was a performance. And it was a performance designed to make me look small so that someone else could look big. Guthrie tried to interrupt. Laurence, I think you're... But Fishburne held up a hand, silencing her without even looking in her direction. He kept his eyes on the camera, on the millions of people watching at home. I've spent my entire career trying to tell stories that matter. Stories about dignity, about truth, about the human experience. And I'm not going to stand here and let someone disrespect that work, disrespect me, just because she thinks it makes for compelling television, so I'm walking away. Not because I can't handle tough questions, but because I refuse to participate in disrespect. The words hung in the air. Guthrie sat speechless, her face pale. She had pushed and pushed, expecting Fishburne to bend, to play along, to give her the dramatic television moment she wanted. But instead, he had turned the tables completely. He had exposed what was really happening, and he had done it with the same quiet dignity he brought to everything else. Before anyone could react, a producer rushed onto the set. A middle-aged man in a suit, red-faced and frantic. He went straight to Fishburne, putting a hand on his arm. "Mr. Fishburne, please, if we could just..." "No," Fishburne said simply, gently removing the producer's hand from his arm. "I'm done here. Whatever you need to do to handle this situation, you do it. But I'm leaving." The producer looked desperately at Guthrie, then back at Fishburne. "Please understand, this is live television. We have millions of viewers. If you leave now, it will..." "It will what?" Fishburne asked, his voice soft but steady. "It will look bad? It will cause problems? Good. Maybe it should. Maybe people should see what happens when you treat a guest with contempt. Maybe they should see that there are some things more important than staying on camera." Guthrie finally found her voice again. "You're making a scene. This is completely unnecessary." Fishburne turned to look at her, really look at her, for what felt like the first time since the interview started. "I'm making a scene," he repeated slowly. "Savannah, you spent the last 15 minutes telling me I was irrelevant, asking me when I was going to step aside, suggesting that my work doesn't matter anymore. And when I decide I've had enough, when I decide to maintain my dignity and leave, I'm the one making a scene?" She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The cameras captured it all, the confusion on her face, the realization that maybe, just maybe, she had gone too far. But it was too late for apologies, too late for damage control. The moment had been recorded. The world was watching. Fishburne nodded, as if her silence confirmed everything he had been saying. "That's what I thought." He looked at the producer, still standing helplessly beside him. "I'm sorry, you're caught in the middle of this. I know you're just trying to do your job. But I can't stay. I won't stay." The producer nodded slowly, defeated. There was nothing he could do. No argument he could make. Fishburne had made his decision, and it was clear that nothing would change his mind. As Fishburne walked toward the exit for the second time, Guthrie made one last desperate attempt to regain control. "Ladies and gentlemen, we seem to be having a technical issue with our guest. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with..." "There's no technical issue," Fishburne called over his shoulder, loud enough for the microphones to catch. "And everyone watching knows it. Don't insult their intelligence." And with that, he was gone. He pushed through the studio doors and disappeared from view. The cameras stayed on Guthrie, who sat frozen at her desk, her carefully constructed professional facade completely shattered. She glanced at the teleprompter, looking for a script, for words, for anything to make sense of what had just happened. But there was nothing. No one had prepared for this. Finally, mercifully, the director cut to commercial. But the damage was done. In the control room, executives were screaming into phones. On social media, clips of the confrontation were already spreading like wildfire. And somewhere in that building, Laurence Fishburne was walking out into the New York morning, his head held high, his integrity intact. When the show came back from commercial, Guthrie tried to continue as if nothing had happened. She introduced the next segment with forced cheerfulness, but her hands were shaking. The studio audience could feel it. The crew could feel it. And most importantly, the viewers at home could feel it. Something fundamental had broken. During the next commercial break, the producer who had tried to stop Fishburne appeared on set again. He approached Guthrie quietly, speaking in low tones that the microphones couldn't pick up, but his body language said everything. He was angry, disappointed, and more than a little worried about what this would mean for the show. Guthrie tried to defend herself. You could see her gesturing, her face flushed, her voice rising even though she was trying to keep it down. But the producer just shook his head. Whatever explanation she was offering, whatever justification she was trying to give, it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. The rest of the show limped along. Guthrie read her lines, interviewed her guests, smiled for the cameras. But the energy was gone. The confidence that usually radiated from her had evaporated. She knew, even if she wouldn't admit it out loud, that she had made a terrible mistake. She had underestimated Laurence Fishburne. She had assumed he would play along, that his professionalism would keep him in that chair no matter what she said. And she had been wrong. By the time the show ended, the video had been viewed millions of times online. People were dissecting every word, every expression, every moment of the confrontation, and overwhelmingly, the consensus was clear. Laurence Fishburne had done the right thing. He had stood up for himself. He had refused to be diminished, and he had done it with grace and dignity. Guthrie, on the other hand, had revealed something ugly: her need to feel superior, her willingness to humiliate someone for entertainment, her assumption that she could say whatever she wanted because she held the power in that room. And people were not happy about it. Not at all. In the hours after the show aired, the comments flooded in. People talked about times they had been dismissed at work, disrespected by someone in authority, made to feel small. Fishburne's walk-off resonated with them on a deep level. It wasn't just about a celebrity leaving a talk show. It was about standing up for yourself when someone tries to tear you down. It was about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone make you forget it. For Guthrie, it was a moment that would define her career in ways she never anticipated. She had wanted to create memorable television, and she had succeeded. Just not in the way she intended. Instead of showcasing her skills as an interviewer, she had exposed her flaws. Instead of making Fishburne look irrelevant, she had made herself look petty and cruel. The interview that was supposed to elevate her had become the interview that revealed who she really was. And Laurence Fishburne, he walked away from that studio with his reputation not just intact, but enhanced. He had shown the world that success isn't measured by how many cameras are on you or how big the platform is. It's measured by how you carry yourself when things get difficult, by whether you compromise your values for convenience, by whether you stand up or stay silent when you're being treated poorly. But the story doesn't end with Fishburne walking out those doors. What happened inside the studio in those final moments before they cut to commercial revealed even more about the dynamics at play. As soon as the camera stopped rolling, the set erupted into chaos. The producer who had tried to stop Fishburne immediately turned to Guthrie. His voice was sharp, cutting through the noise of the panicking crew. "What were you thinking?" he demanded. "What was that?" Guthrie stood up from her chair. Her microphone still lit even though they were off air. "I was doing my job," she shot back. "I was asking questions. If he can't handle that, that's on him. Your job?" The producer's voice rose. "Your job is to interview guests, not to antagonize them until they walk off the set. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to the show? To our reputation?" A camera operator nearby, a woman who had been with the show for 15 years, spoke up. "She was out of line. I've filmed hundreds of interviews and I've never seen anything like that." She was trying to provoke him. Guthrie whipped around to face her. "Excuse me? You don't get to comment on how I conduct my interviews. You point the camera and that's it." "Actually," the camera operator said, her voice steady, "I've been here long enough to know the difference between a tough interview and a hatchet job. That was a hatchet job. And everyone in this studio knows it." Other crew members nodded. Some looked away, uncomfortable with the confrontation, but unwilling to disagree. The atmosphere in the studio had completely shifted. It wasn't just about Fishburne walking off anymore. It was about what Guthrie had revealed about herself, and how that was affecting everyone who worked with her. Before Guthrie could respond, another producer rushed onto the set, phone pressed to her ear. "The network is on the phone. They want to know what happened." "They're getting calls already. Tell them it was a difficult guest," Guthrie said quickly. "Tell them Laurence Fishburne became hostile and walked off without warning." The first producer shook his head. "We're not doing that. We're not lying. The cameras caught everything. It's already online. People are watching right now. They know exactly what happened." Guthrie's face went pale. "What do you mean it's online? People recorded it," the camera operator said, pulling out her phone. "It's everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and the comments are not in your favor." The reality of the situation was finally sinking in. This wasn't just a bad interview. This was a career-defining moment, and not in the way Guthrie had hoped. She reached for her phone, her hands trembling slightly. As she scrolled through social media, you could watch her expression change from defensive to horrified. The comments were brutal, and they were all saying the same thing. Fishburne was right to leave. Guthrie had been cruel, condescending, and completely out of line. We need to do damage control, the second producer said. We need a statement, something that addresses what happened without making it worse. What's there to address? Guthrie asked, her voice sharp again. He's the one who walked off. He's the one who broke the contract. Savannah, the first producer said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. You need to listen to me very carefully. Right now, in this moment, you have a choice. You can take responsibility for what happened, acknowledge that you pushed too hard, and try to salvage this. Or you can double down, blame Fishburne, and watch your career implode. Because I promise you, if you choose the second option, the network will not back you up. They can't. Not when the evidence is this clear. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Guthrie looked around the studio, at the faces of the people she worked with every day. Some looked sympathetic, others looked disappointed, but none of them looked like they were on her side, not after what they had witnessed. Meanwhile, outside the studio, Fishburne was getting into a car. His publicist was already on the phone, fielding calls from journalists, from other talk shows, from people who wanted to know his side of the story. But Fishburne wasn't interested in spinning a narrative. He had said what he needed to say on camera. The truth spoke for itself. Do you want to make a statement? His publicist asked. Something for social media? A press release? Fishburne shook his head. No, I said everything I needed to say in there. Let people draw their own conclusions. They're smart enough to figure it out. And they did. Within hours, the narrative was set. Laurence Fishburne had been disrespected by a host who thought she could say whatever she wanted because she had the power of the platform behind her. And instead of accepting that treatment, he had walked away with his dignity intact. It was a masterclass in self-respect. A reminder that no job, no opportunity, no platform is worth compromising who you are. Back at the studio, as the crew prepared for the next segment, the weight of what had happened was settling over everyone. An intern approached the camera operator who had spoken up earlier. Do you think she'll get fired? The intern asked quietly. The camera operator shrugged. I don't know, but I know this. What happened today changed things. People saw who she really is, and you can't unsee that. You can apologize, you can try to make it right, but you can't erase the moment when you revealed your true character. The intern nodded slowly, understanding. Everyone in that studio understood. They had all watched a powerful person abuse that power, and they had watched someone else refuse to accept it. It was a lesson that went beyond television, beyond celebrity gossip, beyond the entertainment industry. It was a lesson about humanity. As they called the crew back to positions for the next segment, Guthrie sat in her chair, staring at nothing. The makeup artist approached to touch up her face, but Guthrie waved her away. She knew no amount of makeup could fix what had been broken. No amount of professional polish could restore what she had lost in those 15 minutes with Laurence Fishburne. The show went back on air. Guthrie read her lines from the teleprompter, interviewed a cooking segment guest, laughed at the appropriate moments. But something fundamental had changed. You could see it in her eyes. The confidence was gone. The sense of invincibility that came from hosting a major morning show had evaporated. She had learned, in the most public way possible, that power has limits. That respect cannot be demanded, only earned. And that sometimes, the person you think has less power than you is actually the one holding all the cards. In living rooms across America, people watched that next segment with new eyes. They watched Guthrie smile and laugh and pretend everything was fine. And they thought about the times in their own lives when they had been treated the way she treated Fishburne. The times they had been dismissed, belittled, told they were irrelevant or past their prime. And they thought about how rare it was to see someone stand up in that moment. How difficult it was to walk away from something you had committed to because your self-respect mattered more. That morning on the Today Show, in the span of less than 20 minutes, two people revealed who they truly were. One chose to use their position to demean and dismiss. The other chose dignity over duty, self-respect over showmanship. And the world watched and learned which kind of person they wanted to be. The lesson was clear. Power without respect is just tyranny in a smaller form. And the most powerful thing you can do sometimes is simply refuse to participate in your own diminishment. Laurence Fishburne understood that. And on that morning, he showed millions of people what it looks like to stand up for yourself with grace, with class, and with unshakable dignity.